Welcome back to Haunted and Historic Australia. Apologies for the delay, we came down with that dreaded COVID. So it's been a little bit of extra time to get something put together, but I hope you enjoy the episode. This episode we're looking at Samuel Marsden's property. It was around 1816 when it was built and only 100 years later demolished. But there's more to the story, a lot more. Let's first go back to the beginning as to who Samuel Marsden was. We've mentioned him in a few of our episodes, but who was this flogging parson? Samuel Marsden was born in 1765 in the town of Yorkshire, England, to a farmer. He spent most of his childhood going to a simple school as well as helping his father on the farm. In his early life, he was a lay preacher, which is basically someone who spreads the word, even though they're not formally ordained. They preach religious information to people. So he caught the attention of someone quite high up in the ranks of the Church of England. Although he went to just a normal school in the town, he won a scholarship to attend Hull Grammar School, which is where he gained his reverend status, and later offered the position of second chaplain to Reverend Richard Johnson, who was the head reverend in the New South Wales colony. He arrived in 1794 in New South Wales and set up his parsonage in Parramatta. Eventually in 1800 he succeeded Johnson, who went back to England, and he kept this post, the chaplain of Church of England in New South Wales, until his death in 1838. Love him or hate him, the Reverend Samuel Marsden was an important man in the colony of New South Wales. But we're concentrating on this occasion on where he lived in Parramatta, the parsonage as it was called, which is a building that's being constructed for a clergyman. Unfortunately, the home is no longer standing. As mentioned, it was demolished in 1908. But there's some stories that surround this building, even after Marsden died.
So on the Governor's Avenue, this is at Parramatta, just behind Good Street, and the grand house that used to be Ranley once stood here.
Ranley House was a 3-storey pink and white building. It was built in 1863 for Parramatta's Mayor Samuel Burge. It stood on the boundary of Parramatta Park and overlooked the golf club. The grand home had several owners before becoming a social venue. It was popular for decades and the perfect place for birthday parties and wedding receptions, with its excellent catering and views of Parramatta Park. Although they tried to heritage list this building in 1988, it was demolished.
And over here was this was where the Parramatta Rugby Union Club once was. Down there follows down to the that's where the old golf course was, that was created in the 1950s, and they've removed the old golf course. It was an old 9-hole golf course.
The golf course has been removed to make way for a family leisure centre and recreation water park. It also closes the gap between where the golf club was and Parramatta Park.
But this whole area here, this parkland, Parramatta High School, and up there into the Maze Hill Gatehouse, this all used to be part of the original 2,000 acre area of Parramatta Park. So it came all the way up here to what is now the Great Western Highway, but was once known as the Western Road. And this particular carriageway here was dubbed the Governor's Avenue, and it led all the way from this point down here all the way down to the stables situated next to the old government house in the what is today the Parramatta Park. This was an area that was once open, as it was before the addition of the railway line that went through. But have a look at Parramatta. We'll put another photo up here to show you what it once looked like. But it is absolutely amazing, the progress. That building there, that is a residential building, and that used to be the biggest building by far, not only in Parramatta but in the whole surrounding area. Parramatta High School was built in 1913, and there was another residence up here that believed to be to do with Samuel Marsden.
The location of Samuel Marsden's parsonage is where current day O'Connell Street meets Great Western Highway. Before they created the intersection, it would have run straight through the parsonage.
Well, actually, I'll show you a photo. They'll put a photo in now of the original. It's taken, so down there, about approximately there, is where the St. John's Cemetery is, the oldest cemetery in Australia. We've done a video on that. Please go and watch. Like that, there was a picture taken, I believe, in the late 1800s, after probably 1870 to 1890. There's a photograph taken from in front of where the St. John's Cemetery is, and it's looking up to this direction, and you can see here in the photo, you can see a big structure.
The parsonage towered over the park and could be seen from quite a while away.
So you're looking down that way, you see down there, and over that tree line there is the railway line, and then just over the railway line is what is today the Parramatta Park. But just again, have a look at the progress here. These buildings, it's amazing. I mean, the original buildings, I used to live just near here. I believe that one there was one of the originals. The others seem to be obscured by these massive residential towers that are still under construction too. Parramatta has gone leaps and bounds in the last 25 years. But it is a nice cityscape from up here, which is basically Westmead today. But yeah, some of these other flats, like those couple over here, they were always there. This unit block here, the biggest one, it was here in the 80s. It was here in the 70s, but up until the late 80s, it was still the largest one. Then they built one next to it. But they had a lot of large, very large homes here. And you got also some of the original bunya pines that have been here since long ago. These bunya pines here that have lined this original carriageway, which was dubbed the Governor's Avenue, and these gum trees and that. So a lot of these trees, they've always been here. Some of them have been taken down. There's a beautiful specimen right there. Some of them have been taken down. I'll take you up here and show you. There was a very old fig tree that I guess had rotted and become unmanageable, and so it's been cut down to a shadow of its former self. This particular tree here, known by its botanical name as the Ficus macrophylla, I hope I pronounced that right. This tree was grand, to say the least, and unfortunately it's been cut down to a shadow of its former self. It's commonly known as a Moreton Bay fig tree, and the oldest example of a Moreton Bay fig is also in Param. This one here was old, and it is old. It was huge. It used to come right out beyond this perimeter here where you can see the shavings. And this particular tree was here for many, many years, but it would have encroached over onto this new structure that they've added to the existing shell of the original Maze Hill Gatehouse, which was also at this point here, the Great Western Highway where you can see these cars, was known as the Western Road. So the perimeter of this park, of the original park, 2,000 acre park, was here. And this grand old fig tree, Moreton Bay fig, was, for whatever reason, I guess partly to do with rot, but also well, you can see there, it looks like unfortunately the termites have got to it, but she's a grand old girl, this tree. And as I was saying, mentioned the oldest example of a Moreton Bay fig, I believe, in the country, is also in Parramatta, not far from here, and it's situated across the road from the current it's the courthouse, and what used to be, I believe, or it could still be, the blood bank that was there. But yeah, this was a grand tree, this one, and it's a shame that it's left somewhat, but yeah, it was a beautiful example of a Moreton Bay fig. And as you can see here, this building here, not this newer black building, but this building they've painted orange, and which also comes around here to be at the actual original Gatehouse. So this building here was the Maze Hill Gatehouse, and for many years, pretty much I couldn't say how long, but it was many years. It sat with a fence around it, which we'll also show some pictures of. It was fenced up, and it was off limits basically to the public, and it was left left to ruin basically. So they've gutted it, and as we'll see in the video, they back in, I believe, 2014, they began restoration work. They also began unearthing many artifacts that were hidden under the floorboards, different places in the vicinity of this house, but basically every part of it, the roof, and I believe there's additions over here to my left that weren't original, but the middle part here, that grate up the top there, that air vent, they were original, but it was, as I say, off limits to the public for many years. And once it was restored, it was at first it was it was like an eatery, like a cafe, I guess, but now it's a private business that works out of here. It's a shame it wasn't kept for prosperity, just in keeping with the heritage of the area, but at least it wasn't lost. You know, it is somewhat a testament to the endurance of the old place. And of course, you know, the way it was left for 50 years, I'd say, at least longer, when I was a kid, at least it's been able to be resurrected and see life again. Because as you'll see, in the state it was in for the years leading up to 2014, it wasn't good. It was quite a sin, actually. But this area here, so this whole area here, that's the Parramatta High School. There are sections here that have gone. There are historic. They've unearthed bits and pieces, but I think that they've covered things up just to keep it in keeping with, you know. I guess they don't want to be disturbed. Don't want to disturb certain parts. But we'll continue to have a bit of a look here anyway.
It is believed that the first parsonage that Samuel Marsden lived in was on Macquarie Street in Parramatta. Apparently it was so far decayed, being built for Reverend Richard Johnson when he was staying in the Parramatta area, but it was so far decayed that it was making his wife ill. This is how they were able to have the newer parsonage established on the hill at Mays Hill. It was built on a hill, and O'Connell Street was established leading right up to the parsonage. But as we know now, O'Connell Street goes straight through to Western Road or Great Western Highway. But before this, there was actually a hill there, and the road stopped at the parsonage. Today we can see in Campbell Street how the buildings have been built upon a hill, and you actually have to walk upstairs to get to the back of those buildings that front onto Great Western Highway and back onto Campbell Street. You can see the evidence of the hill that was once there. 1835 was a particularly rough year for the Marsdens. It is understood that on Friday the 2nd of October 1835, the wife of Reverend Marsden, Elizabeth, died at the St John's Parsonage. She was 63 years old. Shortly after Elizabeth died, their young infant grandson, Sidney Thomas, passed away. There was also a couple visiting the parsonage, Reverend H. Bobart and his wife Francis. She was only 28 years old at the time. Only a month after the baby, Sidney Thomas, passed away, Francis also died at the parsonage. She had tuberculosis, known as the White Death, and this caused great problems for the parsonage. Bobart would later marry one of Marsden's daughters. Despite the happiness that ended in, there was quite a few people that died at this parsonage. His own passing wouldn't happen at the parsonage though. In his last few days, he decided to take refuge at St Matthew's Parsonage in Windsor, close by to where we did our episode on St Matthew's Cemetery. It was here that he departed this life on the 12th of May 1838, and the following month he would have been 73. He was visiting there in 1838 and passed away in the night in their front room on May the 12th. He was returned to the parsonage in casket, and the procession to his funeral was from St John's Parsonage. And since then, people have said that they've seen him. A Windsor antique dealer by the name of Alex Hendrickson had a night he'd never forget. He was walking past the rectory one night when at the clump of trees beside the building he saw the ghost of Reverend Samuel Marsden. He knows that it was him because the ghost was dressed in dark robes, much as how Reverend Samuel Marsden dressed. He had a very round face, and it appeared that he had cruel look in his eyes. And it wasn't the only sighting. The daughter of the Freeman's Reach schoolmaster, Lorna Campbell, remembers being in the rectory in 1923. She had a similar experience while she was lying in bed and heard footsteps coming up the stairs, one step at a time. This wasn't a one-off, as this happened quite regularly. She would hear the steps of a man coming up the stairs, and she knew and felt that it was Samuel Marsden because he'd died in that room. After Samuel Marsden's death, the St. John's Parsonage fell to his daughter Elizabeth Mary, who had married Reverend Bobart. They lived there until Reverend Bobart's own death in 1854. It then went to his successor, Reverend Robert Lethbridge King, appointed in 1855. He didn't like the house, he finding it too large, so he erected his own cottage nearby and leased out the parsonage. It was from here that it passed through a couple of other hands, including many prominent families who renovated the property slightly, including pulling down various parts of Francis Greenway's creativity and adding a balcony around the second level of the home, where it is known that one of their young children fell onto a brick flower bed, creating quite a lot of damage to his face. There was also a few people that had passed away in the home from those various families. The parsonage had quite a few name changes, but was well known in the 1860s as the Cedars. Up until the mid-1890s, the old place was lived in by a few families, which brought the timeline of this grand old home right up until January 1896, when it became a college for young ladies, or officially the Cedars Ladies' College. One of the young ladies to be enrolled in this school was an Annette Kellerman. Her name isn't much remembered these days, but at the time she was famous, quite ahead of her time. She was arrested for wearing a one-piece, as well as being one of the first ladies to appear nude in a program, and received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. After her time as a boarder at the Parramatta Ladies' College and into adulthood, she also attempted to swim the English Channel. One of the former pupils at the Cedars was a Mrs. Patience Bedford Isaacs, who was interviewed in the 1960s, having been one of the pupils at the Cedars around the 1890s. She mentions a couple of different things, one of which was that her and some of the other girls that were living at this parsonage, who were living there, often would see lights on the property to the distance. There was a lot of say as to what the girls thought it was, from aliens to another saying that it could have been someone who had a lantern entering through some tunnels that were rumoured to be underneath the property. She said that although the rumours were that the tunnel led to the governor's house, that was most likely that they led directly to the St. John's Cemetery, which would have been a quick way for Reverend Samuel Marsden to get to the cemetery. And we know that one night he had to, when the caretaker of the cemetery was murdered. Perhaps it was the cemetery victim who was holding a light out there in the distance. Patience also tells about the library wing of the parsonage being awfully chilly and the girls not wanting to be in that area, and also that an archway had bars across it. All the other archways had none. She thought that was quite strange. And she also speaks of something that happened much later after she left the parsonage. A man by the name of Arthur Wainwright purchased the property after the school had relocated and was taking it apart, demolishing the building as he had done with Mary Raby's building in George Street in the city, as well as various other historic landmarks, possibly in the hope that he could make money off them. And he did make money from the parsonage, finding a jar underneath the floorboards containing many gold sovereigns. It also had a note in there which Arthur Wainwright decided to burn and never tell a soul. Possibly it was a note stating who those gold sovereigns were to be left to, but Arthur Wainwright decided he was going to have them. He'd purchased the house and its contents. It belonged to him, so we will never know what the note said. He also unearthed a body on the grounds in the garden area, very near to that library wing that Patience said was very chilly. There are various rumours as to whose body was dug up. Patience believes that it could have been one of the many Maori students that Samuel Marsden had living in the property. We know that Arthur Wainwright stated that it was most likely one of Samuel Marsden's servants that was buried on the grounds, and Patience seems to think that it wasn't just one body that they unearthed, but there were many, possibly 4. Apparently the remains were moved to St. John's Cemetery, but the names of those buried were never disclosed, and the state that St. John's Cemetery is in at the moment, you may not even be able to find them in there. They may possibly be in unmarked graves. Despite Arthur boasting about his find, there was also other things that he mentioned while he was demolishing the property. Whilst he and his crew who were demolishing the house were staying nearby to the house, they heard some weird noises. It was like a low moaning sound. They found a room that was unlike any of the other rooms, where most were made out of lath and plaster. This one was, and there had been some rumours that one of the rooms of the house facing the park, there was a murder of a young woman. It wasn't from Marsden's time, it is believed. It was more so to be around the time of the Cedar Girls' School. That may have been covered up, but even so, it was just a rumour. The men went to the room that was heavily clad. This one had been barred off for a reason, but they couldn't work out why. They pulled the house apart and even came across a possum up a chimney, which may have been the low groaning that they'd heard. But even still, the workmen almost quit the job, and Arthur Wainwright was sure of a haunting at the property. So even though Samuel Marsden didn't die there and is actually known to be haunting another parsonage in Windsor, this St. John's Parsonage in Parramatta, since demolished, may still have deep secrets buried beneath the grounds. We'll never know, and the current residents haven't really said anything, have they? But still, I think it was a good story. I hope you enjoyed it, and there's going to be plenty more upcoming, including Frederick Birmingham, who was sure he saw a UFO over Parramatta Park. But stay tuned. Now don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and hit that notification bell so you're aware when we're posting new episodes. And don't forget, you can also comment on our videos, letting us know which ones have been your favourite so far, as well as any stories you'd like us to investigate. Stay tuned, guys.
Aussie made.